Well, hi everybody, Father Alex here. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. My guest this week on the Godcast is John Courtney. John is a former winner of Britain's Got Talent. He won the show in the 2020 series. We're going to find out about that and finding out what he has been up to since then. If you do enjoy the Godcast, then please do check out my YouTube channel or find me on social media. You find me on X at AlexDJFrost, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel where you will find hundreds of interviews with famous people, regular boys and girls from the world that we all live in, people from news, media, television, politics, entertainment. So do check that out. And if you'd like to know a bit more, then perhaps read my book, which I'm holding up on the screen now, which is Our Daily Bread: From Argos to the Altar, A Priest's Story. Or you can even find me at St Matthew's Church in Burnley, where I am the vicar. But for now, I very much hope you enjoy this interview with John Courtney. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast this week is John Courtney, who is the winner of Britain's Got Talent in 2020. John, it's great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Alex. How are you? Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah.
Exciting.
And on this bank holiday, as we record this, you're covered in sawdust. You're doing a bit of DIY.
Yeah, do you know what?
What you do?
It's sort of my happy place, to be honest. I've got a little woodworking shop in the back garden, and I normally find a project to do when I come home. If it's not writing songs, it's cutting up wood. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. I've had a couple of guys from the Britain's Got Talent show on. I had Jonathan Antoine, who was the famous opera singer from some years before you, John, but also somebody I know reasonably well was Steve Royal, who was on the same year that you were.
Yeah, Steve's great. Brilliant.
Does 2020 seem like yesterday, or is it kind of
No, it feels like a lifetime ago, to be honest. It was I mean, at the time it felt like it was never going to end, didn't it? For everybody, I think, with everything that was going on. But then looking back, it just seemed to go in a blink of an eye. Whether that was what I was going through personally, professionally, I don't know. But it does seem like a lifetime ago. I feel like a complete has been 5 years ago, man.
It's amazing how quick I was looking at some YouTube clips, and it does for me. It seems like yesterday watching these back, but time moves so quickly, doesn't it? It really does.
Mm.
And just take us back to that period, John. I've done Britain's Got Talent with a priest friend of mine, and we were very clear that when we were going into it, we are going into it for the laugh. We were going into it for the fun. But you do. To me, it's clear that there are some kind of ready-made professionals that have been approached, and there are some people that go through the audition process. How was it for you? How did it come about for you?
Well, I didn't do it for a long time, obviously, despite my kids bugging me to do it, and the occasional email that we sort of professionals get from scouts, talent scouts that work for the show, or producers that work for the show. And there was barely a year that would go by when there wouldn't be an email that would say, "Hi, I'm working on a television show. I've seen your YouTube channel, I've seen you live, or I've seen something of you, and we think you'd be a great fit." And they'd never mention what show it was, but we all knew that it was BGT. So we'd reply and say, "Is it Britain's Got Talent?" And then normally they were quite defensive and said, "Yes, it is. Is that a problem?" And the response was always the same. It's not a problem. I just don't have time to take the risk of putting myself out there. I don't think any of us, well, I can't speak on behalf of anybody else, but I certainly didn't go into it thinking I was going to win a competition. My sole, well, there was two reasons I actually did it, to be honest. One, I always wanted to perform on the Palladium stage. That's a huge deal for me. As I said in my audition, I didn't think it would catch me off guard, but it did. I got a bit of a lump in my throat. It was just a really big deal for me to perform on that stage. It's the stage that I watched all the greats perform on when I was a kid. I used to watch all the variety shows with my mum and dad, to the extent that I went to see a show there probably in 2017, 2016, 2017. And in the interval, I just walked up to the stage and just put my hand on the stage and touched it. And just felt, I'd like to say that there was a light from the sky and it went, and one day I will be here. But it didn't happen. I just thought, how amazing would it be to walk on that stage? And then, I got to my sort of mid 40s, and I thought, well, I'm busy, I'm working. I was very lucky. I was sort of quite in demand doing what I did, but I hadn't been on TV really. I hadn't had a break, and how else was I going to get to perform on the Palladium stage?
Mm.
Well, I'll do the audition, and even if I get buzzed off, I can say that I've performed at the Palladium. But then there was the issue of what to do, because I've had this one man show for 25, almost 30 years now, which uses a bit of stand up and songs at the piano, my own songs, other people's songs, comedy, sort of piano virtuoso. What's the word? Virtuoso-ship. I don't know. Showing off on the piano. And it was about an hour long show, which, I'd been developing over the years. And how do you choose 3 minutes? Well, it's Britain's Got Talent. And I thought, well, I do loads of jokes in the show, which I think are funny. I could put them in. And I was chatting to my friend about it. One of my best friends, Jamie Allen, who's a magic act, very successful magician. And we were talking about it. He'd been on and he'd had sort of some success and some good exposure from it. He said, look, if nothing else, you might get a couple of good corporate bookings out of it. It's got a huge audience. People will see you. And I said, yeah, but what do I do? You've seen my show. What do I do? And he said, well, you write these original songs for your show. Why don't you write an original song about auditioning for the show? And do the usual thing, make fun of the judges, because the punters like that. It's a cheap gag, but it's easily done. It makes everybody know that it's a bespoke song, and sing about why you're doing it. And once he gave me the idea, I sort of wrote it that night. We'd had a couple of old-fashioned cocktails while we were chatting, so I was lubricated, and I went to a piano. And the song, as so often happens when I have a sort of a decent idea, the song can come out quite quickly, at least the sort of bare bones of it. And I wrote my audition song and played it for Jamie the next day. I said, I think I might have something. And he came to the piano and I played it for him. He went, John, that's really good. And in actual fact, it was fairly close to what I actually performed. Normally there's rewrites and, you tweak it. But it came out almost fully formed, really. So once I had the idea, I replied to one of those producers that had been emailing me and said, okay, I might have something. And, if I could perform on the show. And I live in Manchester. So the producer said, yeah, we'd love to have you. And obviously you want to audition at the Lowry because that's 20 minutes from your house. I said, absolutely not. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it at the Palladium. So we had a family trip down to London for the day. And that's how it came about. That's a very long answer to a very short question. Sorry.
Well, it's a good answer. And I'm fascinated. I mean, but John, maybe you could give people an insight into that kind of backstage. Even in the current series, people are saying that things are set up and things are done for production value and kind of and my experience of Britain's Got Talent was I wrote a script and we weren't professionals. We just turned up and they said, yeah, we love it, we'll put you through, etc. But then as the weeks went by, with my script, they wanted a rewrite and then another rewrite but because we were just riding the crest of the wave, we went with it. Just explain how behind the scenes, John, what's going on. So did you do any audition or was it straight to the Lowry to the Palladium for you? How did it work?
I can only speak on my part. I've heard stories of what other people have done, and if you're not a professional or they haven't asked you, they haven't been emailing you and asked you to come on the show, there's a very different process from what I gather. You do maybe what you did. You do a pre-audition. You go in front of producers and crew, and you show them what you're going to do. And sometimes there can be 2 or 3 of those stages where different people watch you, and they might want to rewrite, or they might suggest something, or they might want you to do something that they've got in mind. But that didn't happen with me. I'd already sent a video of my song to one of the producers. I said, look, this is what I've written. And he'd sent it to a senior producer, and they'd agreed that they really wanted it. So a rehearsal time was agreed for my sound check at the Palladium. And I showed up, got escorted into the theatre. There was another act doing a sound check when I got there. But within 10 minutes, I was walking up onto the stage. I barely had time to just take a moment as I first walked on there, just to do the sound check, my first time walking onto the stage. But I did, and my wife was with me. She was taking some photos. I sat at the piano. I played the song through with 4 producers sat in the judges' chairs, But it wasn't an audition. It was just a sound check and maybe a thing for the cameras to see where they were going to film and whatever. And I just sung it through once. And they went, great, thanks. I said, really? Is that it? I'm done. They went, yeah. We'll call you when you're going to be, when we're filming. But we estimate it's going to be late. I mean, that was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And they said, we estimate you're going to be in the second show. They have a show in the afternoon and a show in the evening. We estimate you're going to be in the second show. So there'll be a lot hanging around. As you know, the hotel next door, is it called the Courtyard? I can't remember. The hotel right next door to the Palladium. They sort of take that over, and they take over all the function rooms in that hotel, and they set that up to look like it's backstage. So there's the flight cases that you see in the big BGT letters and things like that. And there's various different rooms that are set up for them to do interviews in. The amount of hours they must film. I mean, it is, I sort of dabble in video editing. it's mind blowing considering how much they filmed of me, and they interviewed my kids and Emma, my wife, um, and just hours and hours of footage, and then didn't use any of it. Didn't use a single second of any of my backstage stuff at all, or even my chat with Ant and Dec, which was really funny, and they didn't use that either. So we were hanging around, and I kept saying, have you got any idea when it's going to be? My youngest was only 8 years old at the time, and those hotel function rooms were pretty uncomfortable. And they finally said, we think you're going to be the last act on in the evening show, so you probably won't be on stage until about 11 o'clock at night. At which point I went to the hotel reception and I said, have you got any rooms left? And they said, we only have a suite left. And I think it cost me about £500 for the day and the night, basically. And I remember I joked, and this has been a story that I've told on various interviews. I said to the receptionist, I said, well, I'd better bloody win this show then, because I haven't got 500 quid to blow on a suite in a hotel. But we got the suite, and thank goodness, because it was a really long day. So Em and the boys sort of chilled there when I went off and did some of these interviews. One of the interviews actually really lovely was underneath the stage, underneath the Palladium stage, where Bruce Forsyth is interred in the wall. And they'd set that up to look like a backstage area. And I got escorted down there. They were doing some slow motion shots of me walking or something. Again, they didn't use any of them.
Yeah.
So I got a chance to go under the stage, which was almost as thrilling as being on top of it. I mean, that's some of the original history under there. And you can look up and see the old stage. And they've sort of whitewashed backstage now. It's all been sanitized, even before sanitizing was necessary. And they got rid of a lot of the sort of graffiti that had been left by huge stars over the years. And it's all quite clinical now, which is a bit sad.
Yeah. And I mean, this is where our similarities. And when we did Britain's Got Talent, we were kept waiting all day, and we were the last act on. We lasted about 40 seconds, John, and I didn't speak a word, but I still had a great.
What did you do? What was the act?
Well, we did a comedy song actually, under the guise of Jack and Crack. We were. My love is comedy. I'm a big fan of Les Dawson. We weren't playing instruments, but they gave us a backing track, but anyway, it's about you. But what I'm interested to know, John, when you got up there, how soon did you think, "Hey, up"? You'll know as a professional, won't you, when the audience is kind of turning towards you, and you've got them. Was that kind of almost like boom?
It was very, very strange, for so many reasons. I mean, first of all, the whole experience is, even for a seasoned professional, walking out onto that stage when it's a full house, when the Palladium's full, coupled with so many cameras being around, and there's cameras on arms and cameras whipping around, and there's guys on with cameras around. Having just stood in the wings and spoken to Ant and Dec, everything is overwhelming. Everything is just another stage of being overwhelmed. And then I sort of finished this really funny chat with Ant and Dec, and Dec said, "Okay, on you go," and just gestured towards the stage. And I've never in my entire career walked on stage without an introduction. Nobody's, I've never heard, "Please welcome." That's just what happens. It doesn't, I think Sinatra used to walk out without an introduction, but that was Sinatra. So he said, "Yeah, you just walk on." So I was so discombobulated, one of my favorite words. And I walked out, and I don't know what the cue was, but the audience suddenly clapped and cheered. I don't know if the warm-up guy was there doing something, but as soon as I walked out, it was everybody just cheered like they were expecting me. So that was a lovely feeling. And I sort of relaxed a bit then, because that's, the stage is my happy place. So I was all right with that. And then, Amanda asked me about performing at the Palladium, and I got a lump in my throat, and I thought, oh, I'm actually feeling more emotional than I thought I was. But then when I started the song, there was a really strange edit that they did, because, and they can edit. They actually cut 2 lines out of my song, which I'm still upset about, because it ruined the whole meter of the song. It ruined the rhyming. I mean, obviously it didn't affect me, because it all worked out okay in the end, but it still bugs me that that's the version that's out there on YouTube. So they do edit. But I sat down, I'd done the interview with Amanda, and then I sort of paused. She said, "Okay, thanks." And then there was a pause, and I looked at the other judges waiting for one of them to chat to me. And I sort of said, "Oh, is that it? Do you just want me to play?" And that got a laugh. And then I sat at the piano and just took a moment, which is what I'd sort of told myself I was going to do. Get to the piano, because it's easy to get the piano and suddenly go into sort of showbiz mode and start performing. And, I thought, no, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to breathe and just take a second and go, this is it. That will help me relax. And as I did that, I said, "This is bonkers," which they kept in the recording. But when I said it, for some reason, the audience burst into laughter, and it really didn't deserve that sort of laugh. And that threw me because I didn't think it was funny. It was just honest. I just sat there and I had a quick look at the theatre and just said, "This is bonkers." And I got a huge. So I thought, well, if they're laughing at that, then the few gags that I've written into the song are gonna kill, you know. And they did. My timing went all over the place because the laughs were much bigger than I was expecting, and the applause sort of during the song. It's really weird as a performer. I mean, normally you have to work to win an audience over. Even if you're on tour and people have paid to see you, the first sort of 5-10 minutes of the show is you sort of finding your feet, the audience sitting into it and relaxing. It's very weird to start doing, unless you're a huge star and everybody knows the song sort of thing. Obviously, that's a different ball game. But to sit there and be playing one song for 3 minutes and then get a standing ovation and have everybody hanging on my every word and laughing, it really was very, very strange. I mean, that's never happened before or since. And I guess it's just the energy of the theatre, the energy. And bearing in mind, they'd been, that audience had been sat there for hours. I mean, it'd been a long show. Everybody was tired. Ant and Dec were absolutely exhausted. Simon was complaining that he was knackered before I even walked on the stage. So I wasn't expecting that sort of energy, and it was incredible. And then the rest, golden buzzer, etc., was just another level of being discombobulated. To be honest, it's like I walked off at the end of it. It was just like I'd been hit by a truck. I was like, "What the heck just happened?"
Yeah.
Strange.
We talked earlier about the editing, and I have to say, I think Britain's Got Talent bring those stories together beautifully. And I was watching that audition, and I don't know what you felt about it. Now, I'm sure you've seen it so many times. It seemed to bring the whole kind of essence of what you were, the way your son joined you on your stage, the way that your younger son was kind of just overwhelmed. It was It was actually a beautiful piece of television, wasn't it? When you look back at that, John, what do you make of it?
Well, it was weird when I watched it being broadcast because obviously that was filmed in January 2020 and it wasn't broadcast until April. And of course, by then we were dealing with other sort of pandemic issues and stuff. I mean, it didn't seem that important. But watching it with my boys when it was being broadcast, I hadn't seen obviously any of their reaction. I hadn't seen them talking before I came on stage, and that was really emotional. One of the things that I'm not supposed to tell people, but I seem to mention it every now and then, is that the shots of Alfie being emotional, most of those was because he was knackered, not emotional. I mean, he was emotional, he was proud of me, but the rubbing of the eyes and maybe looking a little bit teary, that's Alfie's tired face. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but I think that the producers had already decided that they sort of try and not necessarily pigeonhole, but they want everyone to, they know what they have in mind for the story of the show. I've told a lot of people, Simon and the producers and Charlie are they're making a TV show first and a talent show second. It's not like the old days of Opportunity Knocks and New Faces. Some of your listeners might remember the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. They were talent shows predominantly. As cheesy as they were, it was about sort of, whereas what BGT likes to do is find the backstory. They love the emotional story. They want to play on that and make it compulsive TV viewing. And sometimes they might try and manipulate the story of what's going on. And for me, I think they decided that I was the funny dad on the piano, family man, which I am, of course. But that was very much what they wanted to show. I mean, they suggested that Nathan run up. Well, they asked Alfie to run up on the stage originally, but he was having a breakdown because we found out afterwards they mic'd my family in the audience to pick up their comments, and Alfie thought that meant that he was mic'd in the whole theatre. So he was scared to speak or do anything really because he didn't want the whole theatre to hear him. He explained that to us afterwards. So the producers originally said to Alfie, when I was I'd finished the song, the judges were standing up, but Ant and Dec hadn't come out at that point, and the producers went up to Alfie and said, "Do you want to run up and give your dad a hug?" Because they knew that would make great TV. That would look good. And of course, the kids aren't going to do that spontaneously in a theatre, or mine aren't anyway. But Alfie sort of threw himself on the floor in a ball and had this little breakdown. So Nathan went, "I'm going." So he ripped his mic off and just ran up, which is even unusual for him, to be honest. He's not a center of attention kind of guy. So yeah, Nathan ran up, gave me the hug, and then he was there for all the chat, and then Ant and Dec coming out, which was lovely. It did look good, but they certainly tried to create that image. They wanted me to be that sort of family guy, the dad, which is fine. I mean, whatever they did for me worked. So
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that when Steve Royal came on that made me laugh John was, I asked him if it changed his life and whether he started getting recognised in the street. And he went, "Well, do you know what, Alex? I've been waiting for this moment for like I've been working as a pro for 10, 15 years, and it was time of COVID." He said, "I've got a bald head and I had to wear a mask, and no, nobody recognised me." What was it like for you? Were people we getting spotted everywhere, or was it a similar kind of story?
It was similar. I was always surprised when I was recognized because of being out wearing a mask and stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean when it happened, it was nice. I mean, as I say, same as Steve. Really, I've been doing this a long time, and I'd done a lot of performances on cruise ships up to that point. And I think when you've done a show on if there's a ship with 3,000 passengers, say, when you've done your show and most of them have seen it, you're famous on that ship, and you can't walk around the ship or go for dinner or get in a lift without somebody stopping and talking to you, or nudging their friend and saying in a stage whisper, "That's the guy from." So basically, I was a big fish in a small pond before, and I became a small fish in a bigger pond, really, which was people recognized me and saying hi, and everybody was nice. That was the nice thing. Everybody that did recognize me had nice things to say. I know that a couple of people that have been through BGT didn't have as good an experience, and had. I know Nabil, who was the comedian that I was on with. I mean, yeah, he was outspoken, and some of his subject matter was a bit controversial. But still, he was getting death threats to his kids and his family. Just absolutely ridiculous and completely astounding to me. So that's why Steve said what he said when he went off stage. He said, "Just remember what we're doing up here is we're just trying to entertain people." And quite right, because some people were getting quite nasty to some people. But
Yeah.
everybody I met were very nice. Yeah, it was lovely.
Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of people in the public eye where you become particularly with social media now, you become a public target, and people can be so cruel, can't they? It's just extraordinary, I think. But let's just move forward because the final wasn't. We had to wait, didn't you? Because of COVID. Is that right, John? You had to wait quite a period of time between the
Yeah,
audition and
well,
the
I
final.
mean, they didn't know what they were going to do. There was talk of it even being cancelled, which I thought, well, that's going to be very unfair. I've just got a golden buzzer, and then they're going to cancel the whole show. Amanda went on the record in an interview saying, "There's no way we do it without an audience." Um, and because none of us knew how long it was going to go on for and stuff, whatever decisions were made above my pay grade by producers and stuff, they said, "This is what we're going to do." And then we ended up with the giant Zoom screen. It was far from ideal. I mean, if you're a professional entertainer, I mean, certainly for myself, I thrive on that buzz that you get in a live theatre with a live audience. I'm not a fan. My little experience before BGT and since BGT of TV and recording in studios, I did the Saturday Night Takeaway with Ant and Dec, and obviously the Raw Variety and things like that. It's not a comfortable place for me. Being in front of TV cameras, I'm much better just in a theatre with a live audience. If there happen to be cameras there, that's fine, but I play to the live audience. So to have that all taken away and suddenly be doing a giant Zoom call, which is what it was for the semi-finals and the finals, but at least they didn't cancel it. So, and you'll never hear me complaining because, as I say, my experience as a whole, to get the golden buzzer and then be the judge's choice and then to win the show, I can't exactly say I can't complain.
Not really, no. But in between all that, John, you had this health scare, didn't you?
Yeah,
Just if you're happy to talk about that a little
yeah,
bit.
of
Tell us
course,
about
yeah.
how that came around and what that did to you at that period of time when it was almost running alongside the show performance coming up. Just tell a bit about that.
Yeah, well, I got diagnosed with a stage 3 melanoma on my scalp around the time of my audition. I can't remember the exact timeline, but it basically all coincided. It got found then, and then they had to do the biopsy to confirm that it was what they thought it was, and the biopsy confirmed it. Then you have to wait, and of course the waiting was even longer because of COVID, so waiting times were longer than usual anyway. And then the mole got cut out, and there was a few stitches, and then when they found out that it was a malignant, they had to do a skin graft, and that sort of coincided with I think the semi-finals or coming towards the finals. So I had the sponge stapled to my head and things, and then they hid a lot. I mean, a lot of I think the semi-finals. I just had the scar from the mole, so it was like 4 stitches. But having this hairstyle that I have, or lack of hairstyle, you can't hide it unless you're wearing a hat. So I just told them I'd had because we didn't tell anybody on the show what was going on. I didn't want that to become my sort of story, which they would have probably used. I mean, they were trying to milk the fact that my dad had passed away in 2013, and they kept asking me in interviews Would he be proud? How would your dad feel? Because they want that emotional thing. They want to, ideally, I'm there crying, saying, "My dad would have been so proud." But I told them, I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to cry. My dad would have been very proud, and I'm very sad that he's not here to see it. But that's life." So if they'd have found out about the whole cancer diagnosis, I think they probably would have milked that if they could and used it as a story. So we just decided not to tell anybody. So I said I had a small operation, and they filmed everything from one side. Luckily, I'm at the piano, so I'm on sort of side on anyway. But you can barely see it in the semi-finals. And then when I did the Christmas show, I'd had the skin graft by then after I'd won. So they made me a big Christmas hat, which hid the big sponge that was stapled onto my head to cover the skin graft. So it all coincided with everything that was going on. And then I got the all clear just after I won. So when I actually won the show, I didn't know if it had spread or not. And I was sort of thinking the worst in my darkest moments. If it got into my sort of lymph nodes, that can be game over. So I was a bit of an emotional wreck anyway around that time, and then winning the show, I think, just pushed me over the edge. I mean, if nothing else, BGT was a great distraction from everything that I was sort of going through personally. But then I had a checkup just after Christmas, and they found it had spread to my neck. So they'd missed a bit. The sentinel lymph nodes hadn't picked it up. So I had to have what's called a radical neck dissection, which is as much fun as it sounds. About a 7-hour operation, and they take out your jugular and muscles and lymph nodes from one side of your neck. And
But
then
when you've been through such life-changing experience of Britain's Got Talent and also a life-threatening illness, I have a close family member who's been through a life-threatening illness, and it changed their outlook on life completely. Has that experience alongside BGT changed your outlook on life in any way, or is it kind of
I
much the
think
same?
I think it gives you a heightened sense of perspective. I mean, I don't think I stress about the small things as much as I used to. So long as I'm healthy, my kids are healthy, the family's okay. I was never really that ambitious professionally. And, I've always been happy to work and sort of get on with it, but there was never a desire to be famous. I think fame is the byproduct of what we do. I think I mean, nowadays it's a bit frightening because you ask kids what they want to be when they're older, and a lot of them say famous. And that's because of reality shows. You can be famous for being famous, which I don't think is healthy at all. I think fame is a byproduct, and it's not a particularly good byproduct. To my little experience of it, I can't imagine what it's like if you're an A-list celebrity, a movie star, or a pop star, or something. It's incredible. And I think it should be a byproduct. And obviously, with fame comes financial stability quite often, and that's nice when you've got a family. But I was never bothered about sort of being famous. And I think on the back of BGT, I do get asked a lot, why aren't you on TV anymore? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you, haven't you got your own show? I mean, it's a number of reasons. One of them, I wasn't offered it. I mean, it didn't happen anyway, but also I didn't really, well, I couldn't ride the wave immediately because I was having this year's worth of treatment and hospital visits. So, and it was still COVID. I couldn't go on tour straight away. All the theaters were shut. It wasn't, but that was good for me because even if I could go on tour, I wouldn't have been able to because I was having treatment once a month and having all these hospital appointments. So things happen for a reason, It was the sort of story that I've told since it all happened is because I sort of want an answer. I don't, why aren't you more? One lady asked me, why aren't you more successful? That was the question that sort of put me on the back foot, and I told her sort of off the top of my head, I said, well, the money that I won by winning the show, you win £250,000. When they found the cancer had spread to my neck, the waiting time because of COVID as well was almost 6 weeks for the operation to remove the tumor. And I said to my consultant, I said, do you have a private clinic? And he said, well, I do, but it's about £15,000 just for that operation. And I went home and said to my wife, I said, is this what we spend some of the money on? And she said, that's exactly what we spend some of the money on. And I had the operation within a week. So my thinking is, who's to say if I'd have had to wait 6 weeks, that it wouldn't have spread, and that so that is sort of success enough for me. Really, I'm still here. It sounds like a cop out. It sounds like an excuse for not being ambitious, and it might be, but it's fine with me. I'm okay with that, and I'm still working. I'm still busy, and I'm still enjoying life. So it's all good.
I think, John, I think it's a really honest assessment of the industry. I particularly like having musicians on my podcast, and I've spoken to some fabulous musicians who, some of them are just scraping through, and they do it because they love it, not because they want to earn a huge amount of money. That which of course would be nice and helpful, but for many musicians and people in entertainment, it life is a bit of a struggle. So, where does that leave you? 5 years on now. Um, I always, I come from a generation, John, where variety shows were, Saturday, Seaside Special, Live
Mm.
at Her Majesty's, all those wonderful shows. And I was brought up on summer seasons. I love the likes of, like I mentioned, Les Dawson, Cannonball, all those people. That is, there's no space for that on TV now, is there? Is that a sadness for you, or?
I don't know. I mean, it's the same comment you get. People that say comedians nowadays don't make me laugh. Comedy's changed, but it's always changed. It changed from the 20s to the 40s and the 50s, and from the 50s to the 70s, and it has to. Opinions change, life changes. It's in a cycle. And yeah, I grew up the same as you, watching those variety shows. That's why the Palladium was such a big deal. And yes, if I could go back, I'd love to have been a part of that. But I'm a part of this, and that's okay too. There's the stuff that's on. There's stuff today that makes me laugh, and there's stuff that doesn't make me laugh. But that was the same when I was a kid. Um, and so I think it's just nostalgia. It's people looking back and saying, I wish we still had whatever it is. But obviously, you don't. Nostalgia is not looking back at the stuff that you didn't like, and the stuff that offended people, and the stuff that wasn't pleasant or nice to. And it's the same today. There are people that don't want to go and listen to Jimmy Carr and Frankie Boyle doing that sort of comedy. There are people that like Ricky Gervais. There are people that want to listen to, um, you know, gentle Michael McIntyre, Peter Kay. There's comedy for everybody, isn't there? And shows for everybody. And it's changed. Of course, it's changed. And it is what it is. It is, yeah.
So, I mean, it's great. It's great. The honesty. I just love. So when you look back at 2025, one of the things I often say, because I haven't brought any religion into this discussion, but one of the questions I often ask, particularly musicians, is do you think the talent that they possess is a gift? Do you see it that way, John? That that 20 when you won BGT, that wasn't just a bit of luck, a guy who got lucky. That was about talent and a gift that you had. How does that leave you reflecting on it?
I think, well, for myself, my talent, I could play the piano by ear when I was a really young kid. When I was at primary school, I used to come home and play the hymns that we'd been singing at primary school, and I could pick the tune up because it was, hymns are quite memorable, easy tunes to hum. And I'd come home and I'd remember the hymn. So mum and dad recognized that. I mean, I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and they were both musicians. Mum was a singer, dad could play piano and sing. So they gently encouraged me, but I always liken that to kids that are good at, for example, learning a second language. If you get a little kid that can pick up a second language quickly, they don't know they're doing anything clever. For some reason, their brain can just, and then for the rest of their life, it's the easiest thing in the world to speak two languages. And for me, I grew up playing the piano, and then I got interested in magic, and I started doing comedy magic. But I worked at magic. I learned sleight of hand, and that was something that I wanted to do. Whereas the piano is just something I always did. I sat and played. I never practiced. I never did scales. I never had lessons. I just sat and played every day because I wanted to play. Sometimes helping my mum learn new songs for her shows and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's not a wherever you want to believe talent comes from. I think people just have a knack for when people say, "Oh, I haven't got a talent." That's not true. Everybody has a talent. It might be science, it might be maths, it might be music, language, whatever it is. Our brains are wired for certain things. It's why I think the schools are getting this going forever. But my youngest now is 13, and he's not particularly academic, but he's very creative. He loves art. He loves drawing. He's got an incredible imagination. But school almost punish him because he's not doing well in class. And schools want you to excel in every class. If you're not doing well in every class, there must be something wrong. Why try harder? I'm like, well, why don't you focus on what he's good at and encourage that? But of course, schools can't do that unless they're specialist schools. And I think that's a shame, really, because when you find out what kids, especially at that age, young teenagers, they're starting to find what they've got a passion for. And the best thing in the world is to get paid to do something you've got a passion for, which is what I think you and I have managed to do. We're very lucky. It's a tiny minority of the country that get to do that. So I think schools should focus on letting kids find their passion and then find a way to monetize it.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm a man after my own heart, John. I came from that. I was that young boy that you've just described there, and my worry in all that is, I don't want to make this podcast too serious, but my worry in that is that stays with a child forever.
Hmm.
I was constantly reminded how bad I was,
Yeah,
and never celebrated for what I was good at. And that, I'm 55 now, and I'm very lucky that I have a published book, and I write about that in my book about, let's highlight where kids' talents are, and let's give them an opportunity to express them. I've even gone as far as saying I don't understand why maths is a GCSE subject, which I get a lot of ridicule for, but if a kid's talented, then teach them in what they're talented in, and
right.
but that's just my view. But
Absolutely, and teach kids how to take out a mortgage and open a bank account, because nobody teaches that at school either.
no, no,
It
no.
needs to change. I don't know if it will in our lifetimes, but
Well, John, it's been great chatting to you. It's been great to get an insight into a bit of the BGT, and what's the year looking like? You're a busy guy, I guess.
yeah, I'm flying off to. Are you a football fan? Are you a
I
football?
am. I'm a big Burnley fan, John, and we've just gone back to the Premier League, where this time we're going to stay.
Okay, well that means nothing to me because I'm ignorant about football. I'm completely. I can't. It's one of the few things I can't even fake a conversation about. Most things I can. I'll talk about, but football's never been on my radar, and yet I've been booked to perform at the UEFA Championships in Munich this weekend, and I'm doing a hospitality gig, and I have to interview a couple of UEFA footballing legends. And I made it quite clear when the client asked me to do it. I said, "Look, you should know. You might not have the right guy here." I said, "I know nothing about." They went, "No, you're perfect. We want to. It's a feel good." And I've written a couple of songs for the event. But I'm unusually nervous because I'm going to be a complete fish out of water. And of course, I got friends. And my next door neighbor is a huge football fan. And I told him the names of these guys that I'm interviewing, and I've never heard of them, but he has. And
Yeah,
he's
all right.
spitting blood that I'm being paid quite a decent wedge to go and hang out with these people for the weekend. So I'm rubbing his face in it a bit.
Fabulous. Oh, well, I hope that goes well, and maybe you might whet your appetite for football. I don't know.
Maybe. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Well, John, thanks for coming on. I do hope people have enjoyed watching this podcast. Do check out the Godcast. There are literally hundreds of interviews, lots of famous faces, but people from all sorts of genres: music, sport, entertainment, politics, you name it. And for now, John, thanks for coming on the Godcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. It's been a pleasure.